Hey Planeswalkers, this is Eric from Bane Alley Magic coming at you again with a deck tech video. Today I'm talking about another new legendary creature recently spoiled from the up-and-coming Ravnica Allegiance set, Teysa Karlov. But before we begin, just a quick reminder to please like and subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. So, Teysa Karlov is a legendary human advisor for 2 generic, a white and a black. She's a 2/4, and she says if a creature dying causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. And she also says creature tokens you control have vigilance and lifelink. So Teysa is like our new Panharmonicon of Death. If you haven't noticed, with the Orzhov and Rakdos guilds emerging, death is going to be a big part of the Ravnica Allegiance set. There are multiple cards that care about creatures dying. For example, the commanders of my last 2 deck tech videos, Rakdos and the Haunt of Hightower. If you have not already, I suggest you go watch those videos as well. So, doubling triggers when a creature dies and powering up tokens gives us some really nice combos and synergies. But before we talk more about Teysa, I just want to quickly explain 3 reasons why I think token strategies are so good. So, first off, token spells are a form of card advantage in that you are using only one spell to get multiple permanents, while other players are averaging 1 or less permanents for each spell they cast. Second, this form of card advantage also allows token decks to recover easily from board wipes. Even if someone destroys all of our creatures, it will not be difficult for us to get loads of creatures again with only 1 or 2 spells. Third, going wide can easily overwhelm our opponents. In general, going wide means you have a large quantity of small creatures, and going tall means you have a small quantity of large creatures. And so when we are going wide, it's difficult for our opponents to block. And blocking for us, on the other hand, is very easy because we have a great many creatures to chump block with. Finally, before we get into the deck, I'd like to clarify when exactly Teysa triggers, because that's a little confusing. So, first here we got a few cards that do not work with Teysa that some people might think do work with Teysa. So we have Carrion Feeder, which is 1 black for a 1/1 zombie. Carrion Feeder can't block, and it says sacrifice a creature to put a +1/+1 counter on Carrion Feeder. Now, this is what's called an activated ability. It's not a triggered ability. And the activation cost is sacrificing a creature. So with activated abilities, you always see a colon, and on the left side of the colon is the activation cost, and on the right side of the colon is the effect that happens. So here, the creature dying isn't even part of, isn't even the activation trigger. It's not even the what's happening when it's activated. It is the activation cost. So anyway, this does not nothing with Carrion Feeder will double with Teysa Karlov. Now with Arena Rector, when Arena Rector is a 1/2 human cleric for 4 mana, 3 and a white, and she says when Arena Rector dies, you may exile it. If you do, search your library for a Planeswalker card and put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. Well, the problem with this is when it dies, you may exile it, and so it's gone by the time the second trigger will go off. This will put 2 triggers on the stack, but after the first trigger happens, Arena Rector is already gone and exiled, and so the second trigger won't work because it says if you do exile it, well, it's already been exiled. So anyway, Arena Rector wouldn't get 2 triggers. Next we have Liliana Heretical Healer, and same thing, you got to exile Liliana, and then return her transformed into a legendary Planeswalker. I mean, obviously with the legendary status here, there's no way you're going to get 2 Liliana Planeswalkers out of the deal. But even if you had that artifact that says the legend rule doesn't apply, you wouldn't get 2 Lilianas because, you don't transform her twice. You know, you're not getting an extra Liliana out of it, so that wouldn't work. Next, we have Mikaeus Unhallowed, which was an ability I really thought was going to be doubled here. So we got 3 generic and 3 black for a 5/5 zombie cleric, which has Intimidate. It says whenever a human deals damage to you, destroy it, and it says other non-human creatures you control have +1/+1 and have Undying. So when a creature with Undying dies, if it had no +1/+1 counters on it, return it to the battlefield under its owner's control with a +1/+1 counter on it. Same thing here, in just that there are 2 triggers that go on the stack, but by the time the second trigger resolves, the creature is already on the battlefield, so it doesn't re-enter the battlefield with 2 +1/+1 counters. Now, next we have 3 spells that work. So something like Murder Investigation, 1 and a white for an enchantment, or a enchant creature you control. When enchanted creature dies, put X 1/1 white soldier creature tokens onto the battlefield where X is its power. So when the creature dies, Murder Investigation triggers, and so therefore Teysa Karlov is going to double that. Also, I just want you to remember that tokens do hit the graveyard. So tokens do die, and tokens are going to trigger anything that says whenever a creature dies. You know, lots of people think that tokens just instantly phase out, but they don't. They do hit the graveyard before they die. All right, and then lastly, we have the Haunt of Hightower, which is 4 generic and 2 black for a 3/3 legendary vampire with flying and lifelink. Whenever the Haunt of Hightower attacks, defending player discards a card. Whenever a card is put into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere, put a +1/+1 counter on the Haunt of Hightower. So I was really curious because, you know, the Haunt of Hightower, it says whenever a card goes into a defending player's graveyard from anywhere, or into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere. So I went on the judge's chat and I asked, if I control the Haunt of Hightower, whose ability triggers when a card is put into an opponent's graveyard, if I also control Teysa Karlov and then destroy an opponent's creature with a spell like Bedevil, will the Haunt of Hightower's triggered ability happen twice? And if you look here at the chat, you'll see the judge tried to look up the Haunt of Hightower, but he realized it was a new card, so he wasn't able to pull up the information on it, so he had to take a minute to look up the card on another website. And then he came back, when a judge answers with the red name on this website, that means they're making an official statement, kind of. So with the red name, Staunch came on and he said, "Yes, I think so. Bedevil will cause a creature to die, which will cause the Haunt's ability to trigger, and therefore Teysa will see that happen and make it trigger twice." And so I said, all right, thank you. But just to be sure, I went on again today, and I asked again. It happened to be Staunch on there again, and he said for sure this time, even though I had a different name, he said, yes. Much like with Panharmonicon, if you look at what event actually caused the triggered ability to trigger. In this case, the creature dying caused the Haunt's ability to trigger, so Teysa will cause it to trigger a second time. Unfortunately, I didn't have room for the Haunt in this deck. There are going to be lots and lots of options when you build this deck. There are lots of cards you can put in here, so, you know, feel free to put in cards that you have in your own, collection right now. You don't need to buy all the cards for this deck to make it, because there are so many things that synergize with Teysa. When I made this deck, I literally went on a card search and I looked up every single card that had the words, when dies in it. Every single card. And there were like, over 400 results of cards that say when dies in the colors of white, black, or colorless. So lots of results. I picked the ones I think are going to be the absolute very best cards for this deck. So here we go. Let's get into the creatures, starting with our sacrifice outlets. We have, by the way, 27 creatures in the deck. 9 of our creatures make tokens, and then we have 14 other spells that also make creature tokens. So in total, we have 50 different sources of creatures in this deck, so we can definitely put lots of creatures on the battlefield with this deck. Alright, so we got Carrion Feeder, 1 black for a 1/1 zombie. Like we said, it can't block, and you sacrifice a creature to put a +1/+1 counter on it. So what's important is to have a sacrifice outlet where you don't have to pay any mana cost to do it, which most of these are. A couple of them you do have to pay. Anyway, next we have Yahenni, Undying Partisan, one of my favorite new creature cards that came out in the Aether Revolt set. Not exactly new, but I mean, just such an amazing card that people underestimated. It's an amazing commander if you want to build a deck around it. So Yahenni is a 2/2 legendary Aetherborn vampire with haste, and whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, you put a +1/+1 counter on Yahenni, Undying Partisan, and you sacrifice another creature, and Yahenni gains indestructible to the end of the turn. So that +1/+1 counter trigger is going to double with Teysa Karlov, and yeah, I mean, never underestimate haste. You know, it's basically like giving you an extra combat step. And this guy, he just gets huge, and you can sacrifice other creatures to make him indestructible. So he sticks around. You know, he's a big threat. I mean, I played him the other day, and he was a 20/20 before someone was finally able to kill him because I didn't have any other creatures to sacrifice. All right, next we have Sadistic Hypnotist, 3 generic and 2 black for a 2/2 human minion, and it says sacrifice a creature. Target player discards 2 cards. Activate this ability only anytime you could cast a sorcery. Next, we have Regina the Redeemer and Krav the Unredeemed. So I put Regina on here because, you know, she has to be with Krav, of course. She's not a sack outlet, but Krav is the sack outlet. So anyway, Regina the Redeemer is 5 generic and a white for a 4/4 legendary angel from the Battle Bond set. And it says partner with Krav the Unredeemed. So when this creature enters the battlefield, any player, target player, may put Krav into their hand from their library and then shuffle. And Regna the Redeemer has flying, and at the beginning of each end step, if your team gained a life this turn, create 2 1/1 White Warrior creature tokens. Well, of course, Teysa Karlov gives all of our tokens lifelink and vigilance, so we can easily gain life and create those tokens. So Regina and Krav actually synergize really well with Teysa. Krav is 4 generic and a black for a 3/3 legendary demon who partners with Regna. So when you cast Krav, you may search your library for Regna and put her into your hand. And Krav says you may pay a black and sacrifice X creatures to have target player draw X cards and gain X life. Put X +1/+1 counters on Krav the Unredeemed. Next we have Vishkal, Blood Arbiter, 4 generic, a white, and 2 black for a legendary vampire, which is a 5/5 flying lifelink. Wonderful stats, such a cool card, and an awesome sacrifice outlet. You can sacrifice a creature to put X +1/+1 counters on Vishkal, Blood Arbiter, where X is the sacrificed creature's power. And you remove, and then the next ability is, you can remove all +1/+1 counters from Vishkal to have target creature get -1/-1 until the end of the turn for each +1/+1 counter removed this way. So if you sacrifice 3 creatures, he gets 3 +1/+1 counters, and then you can remove those 3 +1/+1 counters to give target creature -3/-3. You know, it's just an infinite sacrifice outlet and kind of a infinite creature killer. Really cool card. Combos off really well when you got tons of tokens. So next we have Teysa Orzhov Scion. For 1, a white, and a black, we have the other counterpart of Teysa Karlov, which is a legendary creature, Human Advisor, which is a 2/3, and she says you can sacrifice 3 white creatures to remove target creature from the game. So you exile any creature by sacking 3 creatures, and whenever another black creature you control is put into a graveyard from play, you put a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying on the battlefield. Pretty sweet. Alright, next we have some creatures that synergize with death or that synergize by dying. You know, so all of these creatures are going to have their triggers doubled by Teysa here. All of these following creatures on the next couple pages. So we got Hallowed Spirit Keeper, 1 a white and a white for a 3/2 with Vigilance, Avatar. And when Hallowed Spirit Creeper dies, you put X 1/1 white spirit creature tokens with flying onto the battlefield, where X is the number of creature cards in your graveyard. Next we have Vindictive Lich, 3 generic and a black for a 4/1 zombie wizard. When Vindictive Lich dies, choose 1 or more. Each mode must target a different player. Target opponent sacrifices a creature, target opponent discards 2 cards, or target opponent loses 5 life. So you choose one of those modes for each of your opponent, you know, whichever is going to be more convenient for you at the time. Vindictive Lich goes really crazy and is just really helpful. He's just a little toolbox all by himself, especially in a deck like this where we're sacrificing things and hopefully, you know, getting them back eventually. Next we have Corpse Augur, 3 generic and a black for a 4/2. When Corpse Augur dies, you draw X cards and you lose X life, where X is the number of creature cards in target player's graveyard. Yeah, so you're going to be drawing tons of cards here. Next, we have Harvester of Souls. 4 generic, a black and a black for a 5/5 demon with Death Touch, which, really helps out when you have that consuming aberration on the battlefield that's like a 20/20 or higher. Anyway, whenever another non-token creature, any other non-token creature dies, you get to draw a card. Sweet. Next, we have Solemn Simulacrum, 4 generic, for a 2/2 golem. When Solemn Simulacrum enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a basic land card and put that onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle your library. When Solemn Simulacrum dies, you may draw a card. Next, we have Wormcoil Engine, a 6/6 Death Touch lifelink worm artifact creature. And when Wormcoil Engine dies, create a 3/3 colorless worm artifact creature token with Death Touch, and a 3/3 colorless worm artifact creature token with lifelink. Sweet. Next, we have Requiem Angel, 5 generic and a white for a 5/5 angel with flying. And whenever any other non-spirit creature you control dies, put a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying onto the battlefield. So every one of these can have their, when a creature dies, ability doubled with Teysa, and that is just huge, especially with something like Vindictive Lich. I mean, with any of them, really. With any of these, even Solemn Simulacrum, you're going to be drawing 2 cards. With Harvester of Souls, you're going to be drawing 2 cards. With Wormcoil Engine, you're going to be putting out 4 3/3 worm tokens, 2 of them with lifelink, 2 of them with Death Touch. With Hallowed Spirit Keeper, you're going to be putting X times 2 1/1 white spirit creature tokens with flying on the battlefield. Vindictive Lich, you're going to be able to choose each of these modes twice. You're going to have 6 modes to choose for Vindictive Lich. And Corpse Augur is going to draw you twice as many cards as what are in target player's graveyard. Super cool. Next, we have Midnight Reaper, 2 generic and a black for a zombie knight. That's a 3/2. Whenever another non-token creature you control dies, Midnight Reaper deals 1 damage to you and you draw a card. Small price to pay for drawing 2 cards. Next, we have Kokusho, the Evening Star, 4 generic and 2 black for a 5/5 legendary dragon spirit with flying. And when Kokusho, the Evening Star dies, each opponent loses 5 life, and you gain life equal to the life lost this way. So normally, each opponent's losing 5, and you're gaining 15 in a 4-player commander game. But with Teysa out, each opponent's going to lose 10, and you're going to gain 30. Pretty awesome. Next, we have Aetherios, God of Passage, 1 generic, a white and a black for a 5/4 indestructible legendary enchantment creature god. And as long as your devotion to white and black is less than 7, Aetherios isn't technically a creature. And whenever another creature you own dies, return it to your hand unless target opponent pays 3 life. So now whenever another creature you own dies, you're gonna return it to your hand unless target opponent pays 3 life, and then another target also pays 3 life. Really awesome to have that ability doubled. Next, we have Massacre Worm, 3 generic and 3 black for a 6/5 worm. When Massacre Worm enters the battlefield, creatures your opponents control get -2/-2 until the end of the turn. Sweet. And whenever a creature an opponent controls is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, in other words, whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, that player loses 2 life. Well, with Teysa out, now they're going to lose 4 life. Amazing. Next, we have Grim Haruspex, 2 generic and a black for a 3/2 human wizard with morph for 1 black. And whenever another non-token creature you control dies, draw a card. If you have Teysa out, you're going to be drawing 2 cards. Next, we have Overseer of the Damned, 5 generic and 2 black for a 5/5 flying demon. And when Overseer of the Damned enters the battlefield, you may destroy target creature. Whenever a non-token creature an opponent controls dies, create a tapped 2/2 black zombie creature token. So we're going to get 2 2/2 black zombie creature tokens if Teysa's out. Next, we have Elenda, the Dusk Rose, 2 generic, a white, and a black for a 1/1 legendary vampire knight with lifelink. And whenever another creature dies, you put a +1/+1 counter on Elenda, the Dusk Rose. And when Elenda dies, create X 1/1 white vampire creature tokens with lifelink, where X is Elenda's power. So on this page, especially Elenda is amazingly powerful when combined with Teysa, because both of her abilities are going to double. She's going to get, whenever another creature dies, she's going to get 2 +1/+1 counters. And when she dies, you're going to get X times 2 1/1 white vampire creature tokens with lifelink, where X is Elenda's power. And let's not forget that Teysa is going to give those creatures vigilance as well. Continuing with creatures, we have Ashen Rider, 4 generic and 2 white and 2 black for a 5/5 flying Archon, and when Ashen Rider enters the battlefield or dies, exile target permanent. So this is going to enter the battlefield, exile something, anything you want. Then when it dies, you're going to get to exile 2 things, anything you want, 2 lands, 2 planeswalkers. Yeah, pretty great. Next we have Academy Rector, 3 generic and a white for a 1/2 cleric. And when Academy Rector is put into a graveyard from play, you may remove Academy Rector from the game. If you do, search your library for an enchantment card and put that card into play, and then shuffle your library. So unfortunately, Academy Rector's ability doesn't trigger twice with Teysa Karlov because you have to exile her, just like the other Academy person. But I did put Academy Rector in this deck because we have some pretty cool enchantments, such as Aetherios. So continuing, we have Teysa, Envoy of Ghosts, 5 generic and a white and a black for a 4/4 Human Advisor, and another, counterpart of the Teysa Karlov. And Teysa, Envoy of Ghosts, has vigilance and protection from creatures, so she can't be targeted by creatures, she can't be dealt damage by creatures, she can't be blocked by creatures. It's great. Now, whenever a creature deals combat damage to you, destroy that creature, and put a 1/1 white and black spirit creature token with flying onto the battlefield. So, this is just fabulous. Anybody deals damage to you, it's dead. Pretty awesome. And next we have a couple of Praetors, which are really cool in this deck. Elish Norn, Grand Cenobite, just goes in tons of white token decks. Pumping up all of our tokens is really important, especially since we don't have access to something like Craterhoof Behemoth. Elish Norn is really the best choice for your Anthem in the token deck, because it's a difference of 4 power in total. So Elish Norn is 5 generic and 2 white for a legendary Praetor, which is a 4/7, and she has vigilance. And other creatures you control get +2/+2, and creatures your opponents control get -2/-2. So, this is basically killing half of your opponent's creatures and making all of the other ones that remain really weaker. And all of your creatures are getting +2/+2. Like I said, that's a difference of 4 power total between your creatures and your opponent's surviving creatures, and that is usually going to be enough for you to win the game. It's going to eliminate tons of blockers, so almost all your tokens are being able to get through. Hopefully when you play this, what you want to do is time it right, because usually, remember, a Praetor, unless you equip it with Lightning Greaves or, Swiftfoot Boots, unless you give it Hexproof or something, usually a Praetor isn't going to survive 1 round around the table. So just plan on that. You need to have its ability start working right away. Yeah, you play Elish Norn, and hopefully you just win the game because you have tons of tokens that all get +2/+2, and, most of your opponent's creatures die, so those tokens can get in and just win with combat damage. Alright, continuing, we have Shieldred, the Whispering one, or Shieldred Whispering one, 5 generic and 2 black for a 6/6 Praetor with Swamp Walk. At the beginning of your upkeep, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. At the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, that player sacrifices a creature. So Shieldred is really great in our deck to have us continually bring back the creatures we've been sacrificing and be able to sacrifice them again every turn. And our last creature on the list is Hero of Bladehold, 2 generic and 2 white for a 3/4 human knight with Battle Cry. Whenever this creature attacks, each other attacking creature gets +1/+0 until the end of the turn. So Hero of Bladehold is going to pump up our whole team as long as they're attacking. And whenever Hero of Bladehold attacks, put 2 1/1 white soldier tokens onto the battlefield tapped and attacking. So she's also going to be making us some tokens as well as pumping up our team. Alright, now on to the token spells. So Luminarch Ascension is 1 and a white for an enchantment that says at the beginning of each opponent's end step, if you didn't lose life this turn, you may put a quest counter on Luminarch Ascension. And you can pay 1 and a white to create a 4/4 white angel creature token with flying. Activate this ability only if Luminarch Ascension has 4 or more quest counters on it. So lots of people think this card is bad. I play it all the time, and people always think it's bad, and it always ends up working. There's always going to be, over a course of a long game, we're in a long game format. That means the game usually goes on a while, and there's all kinds of turns where I don't lose life, and usually this goes off like the very next turn. You play this on turn 2, usually nobody has any creatures out yet, because, low-powered creatures just suck in Commander. So You play this on turn 2. Your first opponent takes their turn. If they don't deal you damage, this gets a quest counter. The next opponent takes their turn. This gets another quest counter. The next opponent takes their turn. This gets another quest counter. And back to you. As long as you didn't lose life, it comes back to you with 3 quest counters on it. And then you go again. And by the end of the next turn, at least one of your opponents probably hasn't attacked you. And yeah, this gets 4 quest counters. Suddenly you're pumping out 4/4 Flying Angels for just 2 mana. Really busted in any token deck. Try it out. I'm sure you won't be unsatisfied, unless someone just blows it up right away, of course. Next we have White Sun Zenith. X white, white, white for an instant. Really important instant speed to play things at the end of the opponent's end step right before your upkeep. So anyway, it says create X 2/2 white cat creature tokens and then shuffle White Sun Zenith back into its owner's library. Really sick. This can just be played over and over again, giving us tons of cat creature tokens, more and more the more mana we have, and like I said, it just keeps getting shuffled back into its owner's library. So don't forget that. Lots of new players will actually forget to shuffle the Zeniths back into their library, but there's a Zenith for every color, so check them out. They're really great. Next we have Martial Coup, X and a white for a sorcery. Create X 1/1 white soldier creature tokens. If X is 5 or more, destroy all other creatures. Haha, yeah. So a board wipe, and it leaves you with a whole team of white soldier creature tokens. A really cool board wipe. Next we have Open the Graves. 3 generic and 2 black for an enchantment. Whenever a non-token creature you control dies, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. So you just get 1 2/2 black zombie creature token, unless you control Teysa Karlov, and then you will get 2 2/2 black zombie creature tokens. Pretty sweet. Next we have Secure the Wastes, X and a white for another instant to put X 1/1 white warrior tokens onto the battlefield. So again, with any instant speed spell like this, you want to wait and cast this at the last possible moment, either in response to someone attacking you, or just in response to the opponent's end step right before your upkeep, just so no one sees it coming, and therefore they've probably used their resources in, dealing with other threats or casting their own spells. Next we have Devout Invocation for 6 generic and a white for a sorcery. Tap any number of untapped creatures you control and put a 4/4 white angel creature token with flying onto the battlefield for each creature tapped this way. So as long as you already have a board full of creatures, you're going to kind of, with this spell, double the amount of creatures you control, but all the new creatures you get are all going to be 4/4 flying angels, so pretty great deal. And next we have 2 of our most powerful creature token creating spells probably in the whole game. First is Storm Herd, which is just fabulous, as long as you got the life. So 8 generic and 2 white, so that's 10 mana for a sorcery, but you put X 1/1 white Pegasus creature tokens with flying on the battlefield, where X is your life total, and let's not forget that Teysa is gaining us tons of life by giving all of our token creatures lifelink, so hopefully we have tons of life, and we're going to get 40, 50, 60 Pegasuses off of this. More than likely, we're probably going to get 20 Pegasuses, maybe more, but 20 Pegasuses for 10 mana is also a pretty sweet deal. Or should I say Pegasi? I don't know. Continuing, we have Plague of Vermin. 6 generic and a black for a sorcery. It says, starting with you, each player may pay any amount of life. Repeat this process until no one pays life. Each player puts a 1/1 black rat creature token into play for each 1 life he or she paid this way. So you pay any amount of life, and then you get that many 1/1 black rat creature tokens. So hopefully, you have tons of life when you play this, but it's only 7 mana. And on turn 7, we should have gained some life by then, we should be up to something, If we are only paying 10 life to get 10 creatures, that's a sweet deal. If the opponent is paying 20 life to get 20 creatures, maybe the next turn we're going to play Elesh Norn and just kill all those creatures anyway. So Plague of Vermin works really great with Elesh Norn, first off, but also really great with just any life gain deck. If you're gaining tons of life, hopefully you have more life than anyone else, you just pay all that life and get loads of tokens that are, by the way, going to have Vigilance and Lifelink with Teysa Karlov on the back. battlefield. Next, we got 2 enchantments that are going to pump up all of our token spells. We have Anointed Procession, which is 3 generic and a white for an enchantment. If an effect would create 1 or more tokens under your control, it creates twice that many of those tokens instead. And I really love it when things say effect. Effect basically means almost anything in the game. If for any reason you get a token, whether it be a treasure token or a creature token, any kind of token, if for any reason you get a token, you get twice that many tokens. Really great in any token deck. And next we have Divine Visitation, 3 generic and 2 white for an enchantment. If 1 or more creature tokens would be created under your control, create that many 4/4 angel creature tokens with flying and vigilance instead. Yeah, this is huge. This is really powerful. This, to me, I think this is more powerful than Doubling Season when it's put inside of a token deck. I mean, Doubling Season is great with the Planeswalkers, but this is way better when it comes to creature tokens. I mean, if you think about it, Doubling Season, for example, would double the number of 1/1 white 1/1 rats that Plague of Vermin would put in the battlefield. So instead of getting 10 rats with Plague of Vermin, if we paid 10 life, we would get 20 rats if we had Doubling Season out. Well, with Divine Visitation, we're going to get 10 4/4 flyers instead of 10 rats, which, if you think about 10 4/4s, that's 40 power, as opposed to getting 21 ones with Doubling Season, that's only 20 power. So I do think Divine Visitation in a token deck actually does a lot more work than Doubling Season. Alright, now on to our Planeswalkers. We got 4 Planeswalkers in the deck because they make tokens, they do other things, they make people mad, it's a lot of fun. So, we got a couple of Sorens. Soren Grim Nemesis, 4 generic, a white and a black, for a Planeswalker that enters with 6 loyalty counters. +1, reveal the top card of your library and put that card into your hand. Each opponent loses life equal to its converted mana cost. Yeah, pretty sweet, drawing cards and draining our opponents of life. -X, Soren Grim Nemesis deals X damage to target creature or Planeswalker, and you gain X life. So gaining life and removing creatures or Planeswalkers. And his ultimate, -9, put a number of 1/1 Black Vampire Knight creature tokens onto the battlefield with lifelink, equal to the highest life total among all players. So whoever has the highest life total, you get that many 1/1 Black Vampire Knight tokens with lifelink. Kind of hard to say all that. Next we have Soren, Lord of Innistrad, 2 generic, a white and a black, for a Planeswalker that enters with 3 loyalty counters. +1, put a 1/1 Black Vampire creature token with lifelink on the battlefield. -2, you get an emblem. Creatures you control get +1/+0. -6, destroy up to 3 target creatures and or other Planeswalkers. Return each card put into a graveyard this way onto the battlefield under your control. Yeah. So you get to destroy 3 things, and you get to get them all as well. Pretty sweet. And getting tokens is pretty sweet, and gaining life is pretty sweet. Soren, Lord of Innistrad, pretty sweet in this deck. Next we have Elspeth, Sun's Champion, 4 generic and 2 black, for a Planeswalker that enters with 4 loyalty counters. One of the most powerful +1 abilities in the game, goes in almost every white deck I own. Planeswalker's +1 ability is you put 3 1/1 white soldier creature tokens onto the battlefield. Amazing. And hopefully if you have, Divine Visitation, you'll be getting 3 4/4 Flying Angels of Vigilance. I don't know. Next, -3, destroy all creatures with power 4 or greater. -7, you get an emblem. Creatures you control get +2/+2 and have flying. Next we have Gideon, Ally of Zendikar, 2 generic and 2 white, for a Planeswalker that enters with 4 loyalty counters. +1, until the end of the turn, he becomes a 5/5 human ally soldier creature with indestructible that's still a Planeswalker, and you prevent all damage that would be dealt to him this turn. For 0, you put a 2/2 White Knight ally creature token onto the battlefield, and for -4, you get an emblem with creatures you control get +1/+1. So most of the time with Gideon, we're going to be using the 0 ability to just get more tokens out every turn, but also having him swing in for 5 damage isn't bad, or also just killing him to get an emblem at any time is pretty amazing as well. You just get an emblem where all your creatures always have +1/+1 for the entire rest of the game. There's nothing anyone can do about it. That's pretty sweet. What's also sweet about running Planeswalkers in a token deck is you have lots of creatures to block to block for the Planeswalkers. So it's really a lot easier for your token deck to have their Planeswalker ultimate than other decks. So next we have a couple of draw card spells, and what's great is both of these draw card spells are going to have their abilities doubled with Teysa Karlov. So Skull Clamp, 1 generic for an artifact equipment with equip 1. Equipped creature gets +1/-1, and whenever equipped creature dies, you draw 2 cards. So with Teysa Karlov out, you're going to be drawing 4 cards, and this, as anybody knows who's played a token deck, is fabulous with every token strategy. It's basically you pay 1 mana, equip it to a token that has 1 toughness, and you're just drawing 2 cards for 1 mana. Now you're going to be drawing 4 cards for 1 mana. 4 cards for 1 mana? It's insane. It's just insane. And next we got Dark Prophecy, 3 black for an enchantment. Whenever a creature you control dies, you draw a card and you lose 1 life. So with Teysa, you're going to be drawing 2 cards, losing 2 life. Not a bad deal. Alright, now on to a few cards that, aren't part of our strategy, but they just do generally well in almost every commander deck. So we got Swiftfoot Boots, 2 generic for equipment. Equip 1, equipped creature has hexproof and haste, and this is just really important to protect our commander. Having an artifact that does this is way better than having a spell that makes our commander indestructible, for example, because we want to be able to continually make our commander protected from our opponent's spell. So Swiftfoot Boots is really great. Same with Lightning Greaves, probably even better. 2 generic for an equipment, which equip 0. Yeah, equip for 0. Equipped creature has haste and shroud, so it can't be the target of any spells or abilities. So as long as Lightning Greaves is on, you can't equip any other equipment onto Teysa or any other artifacts, but we don't have much equipment in this deck, so we don't going to really worry about that. And next we got Rise of the Dark Realms, 7 generic and 2 black for what I consider the most powerful reanimation spell in the whole game, and that's why it's 9 mana. So sorcery speed, put all creature cards from all graveyards onto the battlefield under your control. Pretty amazing, especially in a sacrifice deck. We get all of our creatures back, we get all of our opponent's creatures back, and hopefully we're able to win the next turn if they don't just board wipe us. Next we have our removal package. We had some removal on the creatures we have. Now we have some removal in the form of spells. We got Vindicate, 1 a white and a black for a sorcery, destroy target permanent. Yeah, literally anything. Land, planeswalker, artifact, enchantment, creature, you name it. Vindicate, we'll get rid of it. And I love the artwork. It's got a picture of the Weatherlight destroying the Predator flagship. That's why the Predator flagship never came back. Anyway, next we got Phyrexian Rebirth, 4 generic and 2 white. For a sorcery, you destroy all creatures, then create an XX colorless horror artifact creature token where X is the number of creatures destroyed this way. Unfortunately, X doesn't get doubled with Teysa Karlov, but still, you destroy everything and you're left with 1 huge creature. That's pretty great. Next we have Mortify, 1 a white and a black. For an instant, destroy target creature or enchantment. So you can destroy any creature or enchantment, instant speed. Remember to use this at instant speed if you can. Next we have Grave Pact, 1 and 3 black for an enchantment. Whenever a creature you control dies, each other player sacrifices a creature. So this ability is again going to be doubled with Teysa Karlov. So if Tessa's out, whenever a creature you control dies, each other player sacrifices 2 creatures. Yeah, pretty amazing. Same thing with Dictate of Erebos, 3 generic and 2 black for an enchantment. The difference with this one is it has flash, so you can flash this in right before a bunch of your creatures are going to die, and your opponents aren't going to see it coming. And whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent sacrifices a creature. Again, if Tessa's out, they're going to have to sacrifice 2 creatures. I don't have Butcher of Malakir in this deck because I just didn't have room for it, and I had these 2 guys in. They're cheaper to cast anyway than Butcher of Malakir, and they're going to stick around longer. So I think if you have the chance, I'd rather put these guys in. Though I do have Butcher of Malakir, of course, in my Vampire deck, totally, and I don't have these in. But other than that, I usually put in Grave Pact or Dictate of Erebos if I can. Next I have Mortify, another instant speed spell. Destroy target... Whoa! Little mistake there. Okay, so instead of Mortify here, we're supposed to have that other... Oh my gosh. There's another white spell that's 4... It's... I'm going to look it up right now. Just one moment. Destroy. It's both white and black. Alright. How embarrassing. Oh, well... I guess it must be Exile. It's even better. But this is the card you're going to want in your deck, so just hold on a second while I look it up here. You're gonna definitely want Utter End. So Utter End is 2 generic, a white and a black for an instant, exile target non-land permanent. So as long as it's not a land, you get to exile it for 2, a white and a black. Sorry for my mistake, I put another Mortify in here on accident. Alright, continuing. Anguished Unmaking, 1, a white and a black for an instant, exile target non-land permanent, you lose 3 life. Alright, awesome. Yeah, white and black just has the most awesome package of removal spells, as you can see, just exiling almost literally anything you want. Instant speed is always really powerful. Alright, continuing. We have our ramp package, starting with Soul Ring. Great. Next we have Orzhov Signet, 2 generic for an artifact. You can pay 1 and tap it to add both a white and a black to your mana pool. Next we have Druidic Satchel, 3 generic for an artifact. You can pay 2 and tap it to reveal the top card of your library. If it's a creature card, you put a 1/1 green Sapperling creature token onto the battlefield. If it's a land card, you put that card onto the battlefield under your control. If it's a non-creature, non-land card, you gain 2 life. So we're gaining life, or we're getting a creature, or we're getting a land. Pretty sweet deal with Druidic Satchel. I've got tons of creatures with this card. Really pays off over the long term. Next we have Ashnod's Altar, 3 generic for an artifact. You sacrifice a creature to add 2 generic mana to your mana pool. So it's a sack outlet and it ramps us up. Next we have Extraplanar Lens. For 3 generic, it's an artifact, and it has imprints, so when Extraplanar Lens comes into play, you may remove target land you control from the game. So you have to exile a land you control as you play this. Now, whenever a land with the same name as the imprinted card is tapped for mana, its controller adds 1 mana of his or her mana pool to of any type that land produced. So let's say, for example, we exiled a basic swamp under Extraplanar Lens. Then, whenever any player taps a swamp for mana, they get to add 2 black mana to their mana pool instead of just 1. Now, continuing, we have Orzhov's Locket, 3 generic for an artifact that taps for either a white or a black, or you can pay 4 hybrid white-black mana, tap it, and sacrifice it to draw 2 cards. And next we have Smothering Tithe, 3 generic and a white for one of the coolest cards from the Ravnica Allegiance set I think has ever come out, ever. I mean, it's basically the Rhystic Study for white mana ramp, and white really needs mana ramp. I mean, this is, I feel like, almost better, or is better, than land tax. This is a fabulous card. Whenever an opponent draws a card, that player may pay 2 mana. If that player doesn't, you create a treasure token, which you can sacrifice to add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. So, if you have Anointed Procession, you're going to be getting 2 treasure tokens. But more importantly, your opponents have to do this when they draw a card. So they're much less likely to pay this than they would be to pay something like Rhystic Study, where they only have to pay 1 mana and they do it when they cast their spell. They're not casting a spell when they do this. So if they pay the mana, they might not be able to cast a spell at all. So it really hurts the opponent when you got Smothering Tithe out. I mean, it doesn't hurt them as long as they just don't pay the mana, and you just get to ramp every time they draw a card. Oh man, I love Smothering Tithe. I'm going to buy like 1 million of them. Okay, next we have our last 2 ramp spells, Black Market and Revel in Riches. Both of these triggers are going to double with Teysa Karlov, so this is amazing. So whenever a creature dies, you put a charge counter on Black Market, and at the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, add black mana to your mana pool for each charge counter on Black Market. And this is a 3 generic and 2 black for Black Market. And so anyway, with Teysa Karlov out, whenever a creature dies, you're going to put 2 charge counters on Black Market, and then you're going to get that much more black mana to your mana pool at the beginning of your pre-combat main phase. And Black Market all by itself is a broken card. If you don't know, you should play this card in your commander decks, because I mean, I've seen this card get 20 counters on it easily over the course of a commander game. Like I said, we're in a long game format. This thing can have tons of counters and giving you so much mana, but especially with Teysa Karlov, it's going to be doubled. Oh my god, Black Market. And next we have Revel in Riches, 4 generic and a black for an enchantment. Whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, create a treasure token Procession, which you can sacrifice to add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. So if you have Anointed Procession, you're going to be getting twice that many treasure tokens. If you have Teysa Karlov out, you're going to be getting twice that many treasure tokens. If you have Teysa Karlov and Anointed Procession out, you're going to be getting 4 times that many treasure tokens. And lastly, at the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 10 or more treasures, you win the game. Yeah, so I've seen all the time people play this, people forget about it. Somebody plays a board wipe, next thing you know, the owner of Revel and Riches goes, oh yeah, I win the game because I have 10 treasures, and it's not my job to remind you of it. So if anybody plays this, keep an eye on them. Keep an eye on yourself. You will have 10 treasures in no time with Revel and Riches, and especially if you have Teysa Karlov out. Alright, next on to the land base. So, our deck has 37 lands. In our basics, we have 13 plains and 13 swamps, but onto the lands that enter tapped first. So Baron Moor enters tapped. It taps to add a black mana to your mana pool, and you can cycle it for 1 black. So you pay 1 black, you discard it from your hand to draw a card. This is really useful when you're already mana flooded, and then you draw another land. Well, if that land's a cycling land, you can just discard it and draw another card. So I recommend putting the cycling lands in any commander deck. Literally any commander deck you own, get the lands that cycle. They're really helpful for when you're mana flooded. Same thing with Secluded Steppe. It enters the battlefield tapped. It taps to add a white, or you can cycle it away for 1 white mana. Next we have Bojuka Bog. It enters the battlefield tapped. When it enters the battlefield, exile all cards from target player's graveyard, and it taps for a black mana. So Bojuka Bog goes in literally any black deck I've ever made. It goes in every single black commander deck. If you don't own it, get one now, because they're really cheap, and they do a lot of work. Exiling graveyards is really important in commander, because there's graveyard synergies everywhere. Next we have Orzhov Basilica, a land that enters tapped. When it enters the battlefield, return a land you control to its owner's hand, and it taps to add both a white and a black mana to your mana pool. So over the course of the long game, again we're in a long game format, this is going to pay off. Yes, you got to return a land you control to its owner's hand, but it can be a land that you've already tapped for mana, or you can just play this and then respond to this trigger by tapping the land for mana and floating the mana before you return it to your hand. And anyway, as long as it's a land that's also going to return to the battlefield untapped, it really pays off. You get that land back. You don't want to have this in your opening hand, because then you might have to discard a card if you haven't played a spell before you play this land. You can have it in your opening hand as long as you got other spells you can play and other lands you can play. You don't want this to be like your only land in your hand, definitely. Alright, next we have Temple of the False God. A land that taps to add 2 colorless mana to your mana pool. Activate this ability only if you control 5 or more lands. I also put this in every commander deck. I've never had it fail me. It pretty much always pays off because, like I said, we're in a long game format. And if you don't have 5 or more lands, you're losing the game anyway. Next we have Ghost Quarter, a land that taps to add 1 colorless mana to your mana pool. You can tap and sacrifice Ghost Quarter to destroy target land. Its controller may search his or her library for a basic land and put it onto the battlefield, and then shuffle his or her library. So this will destroy some problematic land our opponents have. If they have something that's going to remove our creatures from combat, or add them tons of mana, some kind of special land, we can get rid of it with Ghost Quarter. Next we have Isolated Chapel, which enters the battlefield tapped unless you control a plains or a swamp, and it taps to add a white or a black. We have Marsh Flats. You tap it, pay 1 life, sacrifice it, search your library for a plains or swamp card, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. We have Godless Shrine. It's a plains and a swamp, so you can search for it with Marsh Flats. As Godless Shrine enters the battlefield, you may pay 2 life. If you don't, it enters the battlefield tapped. Next we have our final bits of the land base, and this is kind of more if you can afford it. I think this is what you should do with this deck. These lands are going to really synergize with this deck. So we got Volrath's Stronghold, a really expensive land. I'm talking this is like an $80 card here, but if you're looking for a really cool land, it's a legendary land that taps to add 1 to your mana pool, or you can pay 1 and a black and tap it to put any creature card from your graveyard on top of your library. Yeah, pretty awesome. Next we have Scrying Sheets, a snow land that taps to add 1 mana to your mana pool, or you can pay 1 and a snow mana, which a snow mana can be paid with 1 mana from a snow permanent. So you pay 1 and a snow to look at the top card of your library. If that card is snow, you may reveal it and put it into your hand. So basically, if the top card of your library is a snow-covered plains or a snow-covered swamp, you get to put it into your hand. So it's a little bit of extra mana ramp that you can put in any monocolored or two-colored deck. I wouldn't recommend putting this in a 3 or 4 color deck or a 5-color deck. I mean, you definitely don't want to do that. But for a 1 or 2 color deck, try out the snow-covered lands. They actually work. They're going to add extra mana to your mana pool. They're definitely better than just getting other basics. And let's see why. So, yeah, like I already said, scrying sheets, you can pay 2 and look at the top card of your library and put it into your hand if it's a land. And this ability is on a land. It's no mana to play this. So a really great way to add extra mana to your mana pool, or to ramp up with a monocolor to bicolor deck. And next we have the extra planar lens synergies. So extra planar lens, like I said before, you exile a land you control from the game, and then whenever a land with the same name as the imprinted card is tapped for mana, its controller adds 1 mana to his or her mana pool of any type that land produced. Well, if you happen to exile a snow-covered land, then only players playing the snow-covered lands are going to be able to double their mana, and usually that's only going to be you. So that's the trick with extra planar lands and the snow-covered lands. You're doubling only your mana with it, as long as you're playing the snow-covered lands. So that is it for the deck. I hope you enjoyed the Teysa Karlov deck tech. If you did, please hit that like button or that subscribe button. It really helps out a lot. My goal is to get to 100 subscribers by July 12th, which is my birthday. That'd be pretty sweet. So that's it for today, guys. This is Eric from Bane Alley Magic signing off. Until next time, take care, take it easy.